Spray Tips with Tom Wolf is brought to you by Loveland Products and All Clear, the premium spray tank cleaner. Don't let spray tank residue lose you money. The results are all clear.
Hello everyone, this is Spray Tips with Tom. I'm Tom Wolf. I'm a spray specialist with Agrimetrics. Today's topic comes from a question that I often get, and that is, can I spray my plants when they're wet with dew early in the mornings? The question is often, will the spray run off the plant, or will it get so diluted that it doesn't work anymore? And that's a really tough question to answer because there's a lot of different factors that come into play in this situation. One of the factors could be that the spray that you're putting on the plant causes the dew to run off. Actually, the plant is so loaded with dew that even a small disturbance from a spray droplet can create this runoff effect, and you actually lose everything you're spraying on. And that is actually a very good concern. We have done some work on this, and we sprayed plants that were completely wetted to the point of runoff in a dew chamber, and we sprayed both finer and coarser sprays on it. And we did find that the coarser sprays were more likely to create runoff than the finer sprays. So you do have a decision to make about droplet size when you decide to spray in the mornings. On the other hand, when we did efficacy testing, we found that even when we had a loss of product on the plant, we measured how much ran off, and about 30% or so would sometimes run off. We couldn't determine a real efficacy downside to it. In other words, the product still seemed to work. And so that could be related to a couple of things. One of them was that we, in most cases, use the label rate, and the label rate has a bit of room for error. So you're allowing imperfect conditions to be accommodated. The second thing is that under conditions of high dew, you have a high humidity, and the cuticle, the waxy layer that covers the leaves, tends to get a little bit hydrated. And when the cuticle is hydrated, some herbicides, particularly the water-soluble ones like glyphosate, will tend to penetrate more easily into that cuticle because hydrophilic or water-loving pathways become opened up. So you might have this counteracting effect. Yes, you do lose some product due to runoff, but on the other hand, the product that does stay gets taken up a little bit better. The other things to consider really are the wettability of the leaf surface. Our grassy weeds and some broadleaf weeds like cleavers, for example, lamb's quarters, are notoriously difficult to wet. In other words, if we disrupt those plants just a little bit, water will immediately start to run off because it's been beating up. It's in large droplets. They have a lot of momentum, and when you disrupt them a little bit, they just say, okay, we're letting go. They're just hanging on by by a thread, literally. So be more cautious with grassy targets that are really wet. They'll likely have a bigger downside on the wet spraying. On the other hand, the easy to wet surfaces, maybe a cotyledon of a canola plant is quite easy to wet. Certainly pigweed is easier to wet, and so on. Maybe you have a little bit more leeway for two reasons. The first one is the leaves tend to be more horizontally oriented. In other words, even if you disrupt a film of water on them, that film is less likely to start running off because it's sort of like on a tabletop. And secondly, because they're more easy to wet, it gives them more surface area with which to hold on to the water droplet or the dew that's on there. So it tends to adhere more strongly, and if you disrupt it with a big drop, say, then it's not going to just let go and come running down. So those are the basic principles that govern this. Another thing that we've observed is the role of surfactant, and this is really more a bit of an academic observation because all of our herbicides either have a surfactant in them, and fungicides or insecticides, or ask for one to be added. So we really never spray without an adjuvant or a surfactant in the spray mixture. But here's the point. When a surfactant-containing drop hits the leaf, its dynamic is completely different than when it's a plain water drop. A surfactant-based drop will mix with the water that's already present on the leaf and will blend with it much more readily. And that could cause spreading, coalescing. It could possibly also even induce runoff. So it's a little bit of an unknown. I think that the best advice I can give is that spraying a wet plant is probably not quite as bad as we think it is because of the counteracting effects of loss of product with runoff to the greater absorption of that more hydrated plant surface. That's a good thing. And on the other hand, though, if the plant is really wet and you have a difficult to wet leaf surface, it's probably wise to use the same advice that we give for inversion spraying, and that is allow the sun to rise, allow the sun's heat to develop for a couple of hours, and burn off not only the inversion but also the surface water, or some of the surface water, on those leaves. And as a result of that, you'll probably have better success in your spray operation. So a bit of a judgment call. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you next time.